Hey everybody, welcome to Aude and Tulava, where we're walking our way through the Lord of the Rings one chapter at a time. Except, last chapter, those two videos. Tom's a confusing dude, so check him out over here. Today is chapter 8, Fog on the Barrow Downs. Let's dive in. We start out learning none of the hobbits heard any noises at night. Frodo, however, has a sort of dream/vision thing while sleeping. Of course, we'll go into detail on that in a little bit. The hobbits get woken up again by Tom, rude, and they have breakfast alone again. And as they get ready to leave, they get their frisky ponies, and even though it says they made to say farewell, it doesn't mention anything about Tom, just that they were saying farewell. Kind of weird. Anyway, they leave their ponies out, and Frodo freaks out because he didn't get to say goodbye to Goldberry, which means that we can assume they said goodbye to Tom already. Luckily for them, Goldberry's waiting for them on top of the last hill that will put Tom's house out of sight. They make their goodbyes. We get a lovely description of the view they get on top of the hill, and on they go. They work their way northward through the fog and mist of the day until they find a hill with a flattened top and like a little hollow circle and a standing stone. They're so pleased with themselves and the progress they're making, they decide to really relax during lunch and end up napping for multiple hours. Like, I have a 15-month-old and I enjoy a good couple hour nap and all, but I feel like I'd be a little bit more eager to keep going when I have these like storied, scary barrows like essentially right next to me. But anyway, they get moving through the fog that, of course, came up while they were sleeping. Fog is thick enough that they don't really know where they're going. They're just kind of playing it by like feel of the land. Presumably, they wanted the main rise of the land to kind of go off to their right as they're working their way north. They're even walking single file as visibility is so bad they don't want to lose each other. But of course, they lose each other. Frodo walks right through this like creepy stone doorway. His pony bolts. It goes totally dark around him. And friends nowhere to be seen, so he like calls out to him. He gets responses from, at least what he assumes are his friends. So normal cries of, trying to find each other and some other cries for help, confusing until they all vanish. Nothing. He keeps searching miserably, calling out his friends until he finally gets another response. Not, for sure, not from his friends. The figure towers over him, seizes his arm, and everything goes black. He wakes up later knowing he's done for. The barrow-wights are outright evil and he has no chance of surviving. As he lays there thinking about his inevitable death, he notices a growing light. The light allows him to see his three friends, so that's good, I guess. It's kind of a good news, bad situation here. Good news is a bunch of treasure around them and they're alive, if, a bit pale. Bad news is there's a big long sword laying across all three of their necks. Not really amazing. And if you didn't think it could get any creepier, Frodo hears a murmuring that changes into an incantation, which is, of course, a poem. And there's some interesting stuff there that we'll definitely talk about. But there's also an arm crawling towards the other hobbits. Was that like the Thing from the Addams Family? I don't know. Frodo then thinks of the ring and if he could put it on and get away, because there's nothing he could really do in that situation. But what the Hobbit readers may already know, hobbits are resilient and can definitely get their courage, when backed into a corner. Frodo grabs a sword near him and strikes the hand, defending his friends. Then he remembers the song Tom taught them if they got in trouble in the barrows. Ho, Tom Bombadil, Tom Bombadillo, by water, wood and hill, by the reed and willow, by fire, sun and moon, hearken now and hear us. Come, Tom Bombadil, for our need is near us. Tom, being Tom, makes a beeline for the hobbits, at least as much as we can assume. Old Tom Bombadil is a merry fellow, bright blue his jacket is, and his boots are yellow. No one has ever caught him yet, for Tom he is the master. His songs are stronger songs, and his feet are faster. Tom rolls away the stone covering the entrance and, singing of course, brings the hobbits out. He goes back and stamps out the arm that Frodo struck, bringing out a bunch of treasure, and then sings the other three hobbits awake, which honestly, singing people awake is pretty epic. As the hobbits wake up and get accustomed to, not having their clothes, Tom calls the ponies back and hobbits get their spare clothes out of their bags. Luckily, Tom decides to go with them just to, set them on the road before they leave. Tom spreads the treasure out along the grass and finds a trinket he decides to give to Goldberry as it's from someone they knew in the past. The hobbits all pick up some daggers which may or may not come in handy in the future. They make their way to the road and Frodo reminds the other hobbits of the Black Riders on their tail. Tom reassures them a little, letting them know they won't be accosted tonight. Probably, maybe. One can hope. Tom leaves them as they begin to travel on the road, as he won't leave the bounds of his lands. Frodo reminds the hobbits he is not to be called Baggins, as they travel, but should instead go by Underhill, and they head off along the road to Bree. Now, the funny thing about this chapter is it seems like not a lot happens. They get caught in the barrow, and that's like pretty much it. And as I started working on this video, I was worried I wouldn't have enough to talk about. But I have a few things to go over that I feel are actually pretty important and will help us understand the world and characters a bit better as we read forward. First, let's talk about Frodo's dream right at the beginning. That night, they heard no noises, but either in his dreams or out of them, he could not tell which. Frodo heard a sweet singing running in his mind, a song that seemed to come like a pale light behind a gray rain curtain, and growing stronger to turn the veil all to glass and silver, until at last it was rolled back, and a far green country opened before him under a swift sunrise. Fans of the movies will recognize this line as Gandalf's while in Minas Tirith talking with Pippin. This is a picture of Valinor. Reading the Calibeth, we learn about the fall of Numenor and how Valinor is taken outside of the world, removed from Middle-earth. So the elves who travel there have to travel the straight path. Instead of like this, they go like this, off the seas, into the air, and onto Valinor. The Rain Curtain reminds me of the hiding of Valinor. After the Noldor leave of the enchantments, Arendelle had to sail through with the help of Silmaril and his wife to reach Valinor and plead for help. That's not the case now, obviously. It's just kind of what it makes me think of. The enchantment rolls back and the hallowed land appears. I mean, I guess it's not that far off, right? If Valinor is basically in space, probably doesn't need to be an enchantment to help everybody breathe on the way there, obviously. And then that's the enchantment that rolls back to unveil the beautiful country. But I also think this is another dream sent by Eru. We see his touch, I think, multiple times throughout the book, and this one, like the one before, seems to be comforting in nature. There's no fear in this dream. It's prophetic, as that is what Frodo is going to experience when he, leaves to go seek healing. And even though we don't really hear about it again, I like to think it stuck with him in his travels and after. There's a song called Big Country by Bela Fleck and the Flecktones. And even if I just think about the song, I get a feeling of beauty and peace comes with it. That's how I think about, Frodo's dream during the second night at Tom's house. Moving forward to the barrow, I won't go into it in this video, but how ridiculous is it that they got caught by one of the wights? That's ridiculous. I want to talk about the incantation and the build up to it. Suddenly a song began, a cold murmur rising and falling. The voice seemed far away and immeasurably dreary, sometimes high in the air and thin, sometimes like a low moan from the ground. Out of the formless stream of sad but horrible sounds, strings of words would now and again shape themselves, grim, hard, cold words, heartless and miserable. The night was railing against the morning of which it was bereaved, and the cold was cursing the warmth for which it hungered. Frodo was chilled to the marrow. After a while, the song became clearer, and with dread in his heart, he perceived that it had changed into an incantation. Cold be hand and heart and bone, and cold be sleep under stone. Never more to wake on stony bed, never till the sun fails and the moon is dead. In the black wind the stars shall die, and still on gold here let them lie, till the Dark Lord lifts his hand over dead sea and withered land. Now, I don't even really know how to begin with the paragraph before the poem. Tolkien paints such a picture of tortured language here. The murmur is either high and thin or a moan coming from the ground, but it's never a full sound. I have a bit of background in audio engineering, and highs and lows by themselves don't make for good listening. The highs tend to be fatiguing and the lows just muddy around. It's nothing really fun to listen to. It makes you a bit anxious because you can't really hear what the sound actually is. And keeping on that audio theme, I hear people talk about how they like to record on tape. Digital just sounds too cold to them. And the funny thing is, they're not entirely wrong. Listening to recordings from the 70s or even, just less electronic music from the 90s and comparing it to something recorded all digitally, there is a difference in the sound. It can be really tough to hear, but it's more of a feeling. Most people call it a warmth. It's what everyone bemoans now that we have to talk to a computer when trying to, cancel our Comcast. We just want the warmth of a human. That's exactly what's missing here. Not surprising, considering the Witch King of Angmar is, the one that cursed these barrows. The incantation itself is terrifying. It's not only an incantation before casting a spell, but it's like a curse. Never more to wake on stony bed. They'll never wake up again. Just lie there on the gold until Sauron rises to power, and then he'll call them to his service. He'll call their spirits to his service, not of ritualistic killing. They're freezing their souls and their bodies in the barrows until called into service by the Dark Lord, which is creepy. Now, something I want to bring up for you to consider, even though I won't go into massive details, Frodo's reaction and thoughts here kind of about the ring and how he interacts there. At first, Frodo felt as if he had indeed been turned into stone by the incantation. Then a wild thought of escape came to him. He wondered if he put on the ring, whether the barrow-wight would miss him and he might find some way out. He thought of himself running free over the grass, grieving for Merry and Sam and Pippin, but free and alive himself. Gandalf would admit if there had been nothing else he could do. Now, I'm sure at this point you understand, I'm gonna bring in Corey Olsen. He really does a great job here, and I don't think I could do it justice. So please watch his discussion about Frodo's thoughts here. I would, love to hear what you think about it. However, is Frodo just kind of thinking about pure self-preservation? Is the ring influencing him? Is there some other outside force influencing him? Let me know in the comments. But barrow-wight or no barrow-wight, we've got Tom Bombadil. Let's take a look at his anti-curse poem first. Get out, you old wight, vanish in the sunlight. Shrivel like a cold mist, like the winds go wailing. Out into the bare lands, far beyond the mountains. Never come here again. Leave your barrow empty. Lost and forgotten be, darker than the darkness, where gates stand forever shut till the world is mended. And wow, literally while I was reading that again, I made a connection that I've never made before. That's why I'm having so much fun doing these videos. So it seems pretty normal. He's telling the wight to leave, get out, be forgotten, but in much more beautiful words than I could really ever think of. But the last line really just hit me like a freight train, where gates stand forever shut till the world is mended. My first thought was at the end of the Silmarillion, the War of Wrath is completed and Morgoth is captured. The end of the Quenta Silmarillion says this: but Morgoth himself, the Valar, thrust through the door of night, beyond the walls of the world, into the timeless void. And a guard is set forever on those walls, and Eärendil keeps watch upon the ramparts of the sky. While Tom says gates and Morgoth is thrust through the door of night, there is still terms used like ramparts and walls of the world that make me think of castle and thus gates. Tom isn't just telling the wights to get out of here and bother no one ever again. He's using like a counter curse to banish them forever to the place Morgoth was banished to. It's really the most severe possible punishment for the wights. And after stomping out the skeletal hand, Tom lays all the treasures out in the sunlight. When he came out, he was bearing in his arms a great load of treasure, things of gold, silver, copper, and bronze, many beads and chains and jeweled ornaments. He climbed the green barrow and laid them all on top in the sunshine. Now, I don't know if Tolkien meant this or not in this specific way, but I think I know why Tom does this with the treasures. Now, I'm also a Justin Files fan, and anyone who's read the series knows the sun is very powerful. Sunrise itself weakens wards and spells, and sunlight can cause spells to unravel, lose their effectiveness and their power. I think that's what Tom is doing here. He's cleansing the treasure, taking it from the wights, letting the sun break down the curses. Probably not so, other people could just come and claim it, but just to further weaken the grip the Witch King has in the area, or had in the area. Next is Tom's Song of Waking, as I'm gonna call it. Wake now, my merry lads, wake and hear me calling. Warm now be heart and limb, the cold stone is fallen. Dark doors standing wide, dead hand is broken. Night under night is flown, and the gate is open. Now, as you look at the trochaic verse, you'll notice the first 3 lines, pretty literal sounding. He tells them to, hear and wake up, commanding them to be warm again because Frodo touched them in the barrow and they were actually pretty cold. The door to the barrow is open. They're not trapped anymore. And the whole dead hand is broken thing is, pretty much the most obvious thing ever since we heard him stomping on it. But what about the last line? Night under night is flown and the gate is open. Of course, Corey talks about this in episode 43, so thank you, Corey, for this. The night under night is the barrow-wight, and it fled. Nothing really crazy there. It brings to mind the anti-curse when he calls the wight darker than the darkness. With night being capitalized, it seems like Tom is naming the wight and the other capital N night that the word is under, rather that the wight is under, can be interpreted as Corey says, the capital S shadow. So the wight is under Sauron. So we could say the first half of the line means the wight given power by Sauron has fled. But what about the gate being open? It's capitalized also, which means we can safely assume it's important, though Tolkien does use capital letters in sometimes seemingly odd places at times. But what does it mean? Corey's interpretation here is the gate is opening is the gate of morning. As we see, the sun is shining, and you can even look at the first part of the line, see that the night has flown, which is basically dawn. Oftentimes Tolkien uses a capital S when he speaks of the sun, when he kind of personifies it. So it's stand to reason the sun is coming through a capital G gate also. I had a fleeting thought too. It could mean something like the gates of the dead or the gates where mortal spirits go when they die. Tom is holding the gates open for the spirits of the hobbits to come back to their bodies, as they were wrongly taken from them by, we'll call it the Goetia, of the Witch King. Not exactly sure how prevalent that theory is, but I like it. Sounds, pretty epic, coming back from the doors of death and, that kind of thing. The last thing I want to talk about is Merry and his false memory. What in the name of wonder? Began Merry, feeling the golden circlet that had slipped over one eye. Then he stopped and a shadow came over his face and he closed his eyes. Of course, I remember, he said, the men of Carn-Dûm came on us at night and we were worsted. Ah, the spear in my heart. He clutched at his breast. No, he said, opening his eyes. What am I saying? I've been dreaming. Where did you get to, Frodo? Now, what in the world is Merry talking about? Well, in the Tale of Years, it says, in the year 1409, the Witch King of Angmar invades Arnor. King Arvelag I is slain. Fornost and Tirn Gorthad are defended. The Tower of Aemon Sul destroyed. The hobbits are captured by the barrow-wight in 3018, 1,609 years ago. The Witch King of Angmar overwhelmed the northern kingdom and brought evil spirits to the barrows to forever haunt. I think the Witch King's curse was mostly to just kind of continually harry the Dunedain and possibly protect the blades that were buried there, as they were made specifically to kill him. And it's safe to assume there's a curse on the other treasures. So Merry is remembering the last moments of the person who wore the jewelry before him, or maybe it's part of the general curse on the barrows to give people memories like that, cause them despair, which wouldn't really be outside the Witch King's idiom, to say the least. And I thought I wouldn't have enough to talk about to make a video. I'll never, ever tout Tolkien again. But thank you for watching, everybody. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know in the comments how you feel about my interpretations here. And until next time, Aude and Tulava, day shall come again.